signs and symptoms, how to react if we suspect that a child has been abused, and then also ways that we can teach our children to be safe. And it'll kind of talk about the things that we talk about in the local schools too. So, child abuse is defined as any harm or threatened harm to a child's welfare through any of these different forms of abuse. So, that could be abuse to their body, like physical abuse or sexual abuse. There's also emotional abuse, and then things like neglect or maltreatment. But ultimately, it's never a kid's job to protect themselves. Kids are our youth. We deserve to protect them, and it is the responsibility of the adults in their lives to protect them and to keep them safe. So it's very important for adults who have kids in their lives to know proper strategies about preventing abuse. So most children, if they have been abused, they don't show any physical signs. Sometimes there could be signs of physical abuse, but the majority of the time, what we'll notice in a kid is emotional signs and symptoms. So things like changes in behavior. So you notice that your kid was acting this way, and now you're seeing a big change in their behavior. That's one of the biggest warning signs or red flags that we ask caregivers to look for, is when their kid is acting different than they usually act. Also, a lot of times trauma and abuse is associated with things like depression, anxiety, fears, reactive behaviors. Sometimes when kids act out or they get in a lot of trouble, it's because of something that's happened to them. Those attention-seeking behaviors that we might see in children sometimes, it's not because kids are just being bad. It's a lot of times rooted in a reaction to something that they've been through. So it's always important to just look deeper and go at what could be the root cause of these negative behaviors that I might be seeing in my child. Why are they acting out more in school? Why are their grades starting to slip and fall? Why don't they want to talk to me about things anymore? If we're noticing these kinds of changes, it doesn't always mean that something bad has happened, but it is a reason to pay more attention and ask some questions, and to show that kid that you care, right? Ask them, what's going on? I've noticed these changes in your life, and is there something that's causing these changes? So we also want to be able to talk to our children about their bodies and about safety, and this should start at a very young age. One of the best protective factors that we can have for our children is our relationship with them. So you want to have a relationship with your kids where they feel comfortable talking to you, asking you questions, coming to you with concerns. What we don't want kids to do is maybe just Google something, right? Or talk to their friends about it. And of course, we want them to have friends and peers and support, but ultimately you as the parent, you want your kid to come to you if they have concerns. So you want to nurture a relationship where you can have difficult conversations without fear or judgment or stigma. And so these are some things that we should be teaching our kids, and these are kind of known strategies to prevent child abuse. So the first is body autonomy. So that's teaching a kid that they have ownership of their own bodies, right? They can say no to things. Their body belongs to them. They deserve to feel safe. And if anyone in their life does anything to hurt them or makes them feel uncomfortable, they have the right to speak up and say no. And everybody has the right to say no when they feel unsafe. Now, we do want to make sure that our kids are respectful, right? And so we talk to kids about very specific examples of when it is okay to say no and when it's not, right? So if your mom asks you to clean your room, you should not tell your mom no. That is disrespectful. But if someone is causing you physical harm, then you could ask them to stop. We also want to avoid teaching stereotypes that enable abuse to happen. And so what I mean by this is sometimes ideas about things that only should be pertaining to a certain gender. So boys shouldn't cry or boys shouldn't show emotion. Unfortunately, what we know is that statistically, if a boy has been abused, they are much less likely to report it because of fears of being shamed or stigmatized or deemed as less manly. And if we, instill these ideas in our kids, what could happen, unfortunately, is that if they have been harmed, they may not come forward and ask for help if they feel like it's unacceptable to do so. We also want to avoid statements that put blame on a victim. No one is ever responsible for their own abuse. No one's perfect. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes if we make mistakes, there are consequences, but it's not appropriate for a consequence to cause harm to a child. And so you don't want to say things like, well, they deserved that. Nobody ever deserves to be physically, emotionally, or sexually harmed by someone else. And we also want to discourage from teaching certain things that might prohibit people from reporting abuse as well. So again, sometimes it's those stigmas of culture, of fear of reporting, but if kids don't report their abuse, they aren't going to receive the help and services that they need to have healing from those events. If your kids have access to technology, cell phones, computers, tablets, gaming systems, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this in detail more, but from a very young age, we should be teaching children, if somebody shows you a picture that makes you feel uncomfortable, that's a bad picture. If someone shows you a picture that's funny or you're not sure about it, ask an adult, right? So when kids have access to technology, it's not even that they're maybe trying to find bad stuff. Sometimes trouble finds them on cell phones and computers, and we want them to understand that if something pops up and it's weird or confusing or inappropriate, they need to come to an adult. And if kids have access to devices that have cameras, we should be teaching them what are appropriate pictures to be taking. So, if their little brother is running around getting ready for the bath and they don't have their clothes on, then we don't want to take a picture of little brother at that time, right? And it's just teaching those things early on so that it starts setting the standard of what is appropriate use of technology, even though there's no harm in it, right? It's maybe just a funny picture that they're taking, but we want to instill that knowledge that it isn't appropriate to ever take a picture of someone when they don't have clothes on, even if it is a little baby brother. We also want to teach kids to identify things like tricks and bribes and threats. Because when I talk about grooming, in a minute, those are key strategies that someone would use to groom a child for abuse, is by trying to trick them into thinking that it's safe, or by trying to bribe them, by offering them things, or by threatening them, especially threatening them to keep secrets. So in a minute, we'll talk about grooming, and that we'll go into that in a little bit more. Also, secrecy is important to talk to kids about. So when we go into schools, we help them identify good secrets versus bad secrets. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm struggling with here we go. Oh, wait, a couple more. So a bad secret is one that makes them feel afraid. Good secrets are things like a surprise birthday party. And we want to teach our kids that they should never keep a secret from a caregiver, right? If you are the person that is responsible for protecting your child and keeping them safe, you don't want them to keep secrets from you. Also, kids are really good at identifying rules about strangers. Like, I go into schools and kids know all about stranger danger and don't talk to strangers, don't take candy from strangers. But we also want them to understand, because most of the time abuse does not come from a stranger. It comes from someone in their life. And so they need to understand that they have the right to feel safe with anyone, with friends, with family members, with siblings, neighbors. No one should make them feel unsafe or uncomfortable, and not just strangers. We also want to teach kids about having multiple safe adults in their lives. You as the caregiver, of course you want your kid to come to you if they need help, but there may be times where they need to talk to someone else, like a teacher or an aunt or an uncle or like a youth leader in your ministry, right? It's important that they have multiple people that they can talk to if they need help, because you never know when something might happen or who they might feel comfortable talking to. And then I always tell my kids this. I tell them almost every day, it is my number one job to keep you safe. Because what I don't want my kids to think is that they are responsible for their own safety. They are not. I am responsible for their safety. And I want them to know that, because then if something unsafe happens, I hope that they connect that I'm the person that they should come talk to. Like me or their father, we are the people that they should come and talk to. We want to encourage that you teach kids proper names for all body parts and that you can talk about their bodies without stigma or shame or fear. If we make any part of their bodies seem uncomfortable or bad or inappropriate, then that might restrict a kid from talking about those parts of their bodies if something has happened to them or if they need help. So again, when we talk about bodies, there's no shame. And if it's just normalized, this helps kids talk about it if something abusive has happened to them. It's important that we teach kids the concept of consent, and we model consent, right? So if we're going to give a kid a hug, we should ask, can I hug you? And if the kid says yes, we can hug them. We also want kids to be asking each other for consent. Is it okay if I play with you? If your friend doesn't want to play with you, we have to respect each other's boundaries. And again, this is just good building blocks for the future when we talk about consent. And then a lot of times kids feel like if they go to an adult, they're going to be labeled a snitch or a tattletale. So when I talk to kids about this, I always say that tattling is when you go to an adult because you're trying to get someone else in trouble. Telling is when you go to an adult because someone needs help. It's not nice to tattle, but it's always okay to tell. And those things are different. So grooming is an important topic to talk about when we talk about child safety, and we can teach our kids about grooming as well. So grooming is a process where somebody who has the intentions of harming a child, and specifically we're talking about usually sexual abuse, first they will spend time getting to know that kid and gaining their trust and building a relationship. So grooming, and this is how I talk to kids about it, it starts out as somebody being overly kind and nice and helpful and complimentary, but especially when it gets targeted to just one or a few individuals. So like if somebody buys a gift for the entire class, that is not grooming. But if someone is targeting specialized treatment to one individual, that's a little more concerning. But it's in green because it's not necessarily a bad thing. Just because somebody wants to be kind and nice and helpful doesn't mean they're a bad person with bad intentions. Most people are good and nice and kind and don't want to do anything to hurt anyone else. But it's important that they start to recognize that, because then the next step that happens in grooming is called desensitization. And so that's where that person, once they've gained the trust, they'll slowly introduce like inappropriate things or boundary violations to see how that kid reacts and test their reaction and make it feel normal. So maybe they'll tell them like an inappropriate joke, or they'll constantly be giving them lots of hugs, even if the child has said, I don't want hugs. So that's like testing the boundaries. But then even that is not necessarily a bad thing, right? But when it becomes most concerning is when that person asks that kid to keep secrets. So that's why talking to kids about secrets is important, because it should never have to be a secret if somebody's being kind and nice and helpful. So I always tell kids, if somebody says, hey, you can't tell anyone that I bought you those things, you can't tell anyone that I gave you those gifts, you can't tell anyone that we've been texting after school, if now your time spent with this person is a secret, that's when it's really concerning and a time when you'd want to talk to one of your safe adults. So grooming follows a really predictable pattern. And so this is what an offender might do if they were trying to groom a child for abuse. First, they would identify a vulnerability that they could take advantage of. And we all have vulnerabilities. It's just a want or a need. And so then they would do the building trust process. And then they would fulfill those needs by offering whatever that child wanted or needed. And sometimes grooming also happens to the family or a community. So grooming is not necessarily just on an individual, but it's where this person gains the trust of a family or a community to gain access and time. And then there's the desensitization process, isolation. So they use that trust to gain one-on-one or alone time with that youth. And then the secrecy, the blame, the threats. This is something that we teach kids in schools. So if your kids have been in any of my lessons in the schools, we teach them either the 3-part safety rule or the 5-part safety rule. So this is just if they ever feel unsafe or uncomfortable, they have the right to say no. They want to do what they can to get away. But most importantly, they need to talk to a trusted adult if someone's made them feel unsafe. So again, as the caregivers in their lives, we want them to be always coming back and talking to us and asking for help when they need it. This is the 5-part safety rule that we use with older children. It's very similar. We just add in a few more elements here. So now, online safety. The bad news is that the internet is a very unsafe place for children and teens, especially when there is no supervision. And for us as a caregiver, it is important that we're supervising the things that our children do online. So digital abuse is the victimization of children through the use of technology. And it can happen on any device, any platform. If it connects to the internet, it becomes a risky place for children. Now, online problems can range from many different things, from growing up too fast by being exposed to content that's inappropriate for children, giving kids unrealistic expectations about what life should look like. A lot of times, social media can lead to things like self-harm or a poor sense of self-worth. People can become addicted to technology. There's a lot of false information out there. So again, we don't just want our kids necessarily searching something on Google and thinking that's the correct information. Or maybe that might not be the information that aligns with your family or your personal values about things. Safety is a big concern. And the internet is a really isolated space. And whenever abuse happens, it's typically in an isolated one-on-one environment. So the good news is that you don't have to be a technology expert to protect kids online, because what is predictable is preventable. And a lot of times when child abuse happens, there are many warning signs that we could be looking out for. So if we put in place some really good safety rules about what our kids are doing online, we can prevent a lot of this stuff from happening. So first, you as the caregiver get to decide at what age your child gets access to technology and what that technology is. Me personally, for my children, my hope is that I will not be giving them their own cell phones until they're 16 years old. That's just me personally. Everybody gets to make their own choices. Every child is different, right? And then when they do have access to technology, it's your job to decide what apps they can download, what games they can play, and at what age. So if a kid is going to have a device, one of your rules should be if you're going to download a game or an app, you have to ask me first. There is no expectation of privacy on your kids' devices. You want your kids to know that you're going to look through their phone, through their tablet, through their gaming systems. And you should do that as a parent periodically. Be looking. You bought the device, right? It's not your kid's device. You paid for it. You pay for the cell phone service. Your kid gets the right to use it when they make good choices. But again, you should be monitoring what's happening on those devices. We at the CAC strongly suggest that children do not have access to their devices in their rooms at night. This is when a lot of stuff can happen and you can't control when they log on and what they do. Camera use, we talked about this. Gaming, there's a lot of really horrible trash talking that happens in video games. I don't know if you've heard any of the things that some of the people are saying on there. So one way to help you know what's being said is that if you have the gaming console set up in an open space, like the living room, where you can see or hear what is happening in those games, whom they are allowed to communicate with. This is where we want to teach kids about stranger danger. They should not be accepting friend requests, followers, subscribers, especially on social media, from people who they've never met before in real life. And just know that if your kids are playing games through the use of the internet, most of the time it's random people that come together, and so they are playing with strangers while they're doing those games. So you want to be talking to them about how they should be communicating with those people while they're playing games like Roblox and Fortnite and Minecraft and all those things. You want to set up the accounts together. Most accounts you can set up as like private. You can put settings in there, and then that helps you as the parent kind of know how those different games and apps work. Time limits is important. Technology is addictive, even for adults. I struggle with looking at my phone for too much time out of the day. And so, we can't expect a kid to be able to maybe put parameters on themselves. We should have time limits on how much, they can spend on their devices. If your child is going to go to someone else's home, Be bold and share your rules with those parents. If you don't want your children playing certain games, if you don't want your children on certain social media, like you don't want your kids to be on TikTok, share those rules with those parents because one, then you're helping enforce the rules, but two, then you're also helping spread awareness to other families about this topic. And my most favorite rule is that technology is a privilege, not a right. And so if your child violates any of the rules that you have, then you have the right to take it away because they've lost their privilege. And I'm sorry to the kids in the room, you guys might not like these rules. So as caregivers, we do have some really good tools that we can use to also protect kids. So these are some of the ones that we recommend. Bark is an app that you can download, and it will basically screen your child's phone. And if any keywords pop up on their phone, it'll alert you. So it'll tell you if they're talking about inappropriate things, drugs, alcohol, if they're talking about suicide. This is a really important app, and it has really protected a lot of kids because a lot of times they'll talk to their friends about these things, and they'll do so through text messages, and then this will notify you if those keywords are popping up. Protect My Child is a Michigan registry that you can put any device that's used by a child on this registry, and it will block any advertisements of anything that's illegal for a child to purchase. So it'll block advertisements from drugs, alcohol, pornography. It'll try to block those ads from just popping up, because again, kids often are not looking for trouble online. It finds them through pop-ups, through YouTube videos, just the next video starts playing. It's not that kids are, necessarily searching out inappropriate stuff online. It tends to find them. Oh, and then the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is one of my favorite online resources. They have tons of information for caregivers and for youth. This is also the home of the cyber tip line, so it's somewhere you could go and report if you had concerns about a child being exploited online. So if your child tells you that they have been harmed, this is what we call a disclosure. And this is really a key time in their lives where it's very important that you react in certain ways. And one of those is that you don't have a huge, big reaction. And you might feel angry, you might feel upset, you might be sad. But if you show those emotions to your child, it might cause them to shut down and not want to talk anymore. So you want to, as much as possible, remain very calm and neutral. If a child is telling you that they've been harmed or if they've been abused, it is important that you tell that kid, I believe you. Because most of the time, children do not lie about abuse. There's a lot of research and statistics that show this. And even if they are, if you say, I believe you, then you're showing them that you are a trusted person that's going to take them at their word. And that's important, that they realize, if I do say these things, this person is going to take action on it. Then you also say whatever you need to say, but you want to thank them for telling you, because talking about being abused is really difficult for children. It takes a lot of courage for a child to tell an adult that something's happened to them. And then you want to acknowledge that you don't have all the answers, because you don't, right? You're like, I'm going to do everything in my power to keep you safe. We're going to have to talk to some other people about this, but I don't really know what's going to happen, but we're going to get through it together. I'm here for you. And you can talk to me whenever you need to. Because most of the time, children don't disclose everything about their abuse all at once. It usually comes out in little pieces over time. So as they tell a little bit, they gauge your reaction. And if you're calm and you're present, then they realize, okay, this wasn't so bad. Maybe I can talk a little bit more or a little bit more. So usually it comes out in pieces over time. So you want to make yourself available. And then it's important that we don't over-question children. But we get enough information that we need. So you don't want to offer suggestions and say, well, was it this person? Was it that person? How many times did it happen? Then you're becoming an investigator, and that isn't your job. Your job is to be a supportive person in their life. So you want to ask open-ended things like, what else should I know? What happened next? Tell me more, so they can put it in their words. And this is really important when we talk about an investigation that might happen if a child has been abused. It's important that we avoid doing some things as well. We want to avoid saying things that might possibly not be accurate, right? So we want to avoid saying, like, I'm going to make sure this never happens to you again. Because as much as you want to do that, sometimes you can't. And you want to be seen as being reliable and truthful to that child. We don't want to say things like, are you sure? Are you telling me the truth? Were you dreaming? Because when you say that, what you're telling that kid is, I don't believe you. And sometimes the things they say might be really hard to believe. But we need to take our kids at their word because unfortunately many people who have reported abuse are not believed, and therefore they don't report it anymore because they say, well, why would I if I wasn't believed the first time? If this child is not yours, you may want to refrain from saying, do your parents know about this? Unfortunately, there may be reasons why they don't want their parents to know. And as much as we want to think that, those parents would protect those kids, we never know what else might be happening in that home or behind closed doors. And so if the child is not your child and they're telling you about something else that happened, your job is really to just react in a way that protects them in that moment, and then you're going to try to probably be making a report. We don't want to say things like, why didn't you tell me sooner, right? And it might be a good intention of like, I was here for you, but kids or everybody deserves the right to talk about what happened to them on their own terms, in their own time. Again, avoiding yes and no questions, avoiding offering suggestions. If this is like an organization, we don't want to have kids write down statements about what happened to them. That can become really problematic, especially if it becomes a more serious investigation. And then if we're talking to children about maybe something that happened within an organization, we want to talk to them at separate times. So we wouldn't want to bring, like, if one child did something harmful to another child, we'd want to talk to them in separate time and spaces, not bring them both into the office and talk to them together. So, as organizations, like whether it's a faith-based community or it's the YMCA or it's the school that your kids attend, those organizations should all have policies about protecting kids and protecting youth. And one of the best things that those policies can say is that we eliminate any isolated one-on-one interactions with youth. So there are multiple children present, there are multiple adults present, and this protects the adults who work in those organizations as well as the kids who are attending those spaces. And one thing that I do in the community is I help organizations write their child protection policies. And so if you have an organization and you'd like me to help do that, or you want to review the policies that you have, I'm more than happy. Also, those policies should outline good boundaries that adults should be having with youth in those organizations. And so that is stuff like avoiding physical contact, or if you allow the child to initiate the physical contact. So if a kid runs up to you and gives you a hug, that's fine. But as an adult, we should not be forcing hugs or physical contact on children. And instead, maybe we do things like a high five or a fist bump or an elbow bump. Those are more like appropriate interactions with youth and organizations. We want to avoid preferential treatment and giving gifts, because sometimes that could be misinterpreted as that grooming behavior that we talked about. So if we are going to give a reward or a gift, it's to everybody, or it's something that was earned through some fair process, right? So all the kids were involved in this competition and the winner receives the gift, right? But that's out in the open. It's not like one gift to one kid for no reason. Communication with children should be open and public. If you're going to text a kid, you should also text their parent. It's a group chat. You're not directly texting youth in these organizations. If you're a camp counselor, you should not be sending friend requests to kids through social media. If you're a teacher, you should not be using Messenger to communicate with students. You should be using approved, like school issued. You have a question? Oh, great. If you're what? And you friend someone? So if you're playing an online game and somebody sends you a friend request, my suggestion would be that you ask your parents, is it okay for me to accept this friend request? But also, if we're playing online games, a lot of times just random people log on, right? And you just end up playing the game together. So what's most safe in that situation is just only talk about what's happening in the game. So if a random person is playing a game with you, then we shouldn't be talking about our life our personal information. Just talk about what's happening in the game. And if you're concerned, you could always ask an adult. Yes? Did you have a follow-up? Okay, we'll wait. But I'm proud of you for asking a question. That's good. So this is also, we said, adults shouldn't be using social media to be communicating with kids. And this eliminates those isolated interactions. And then as adults, it's our job to reinforce children's boundaries. If it looks to us like a kid is uncomfortable in a situation, it's okay for that adult to step in and say, hey, I think they're done with that right now. Because it can be hard for a kid to stand up and enforce their own boundaries. But if a child looks uncomfortable, right? Like if somebody's tickling a kid and that kid looks uncomfortable being tickled, as the adult, it's okay for you to step in and say, hey, let's do a different thing. Or let's go to a different room, and just intervene when you see somebody crossing a boundary. And if you see adults violating kids' boundaries, or you have concerns, you have a bad gut feeling, it's always okay to report those. So, ways to report child abuse. If you suspect that a child has been abused as an adult, it's our responsibility to report that and let the professionals be the one to help those kids. So that's through law enforcement, the cyber tip line, or there's also the 24-hour child abuse and neglect hotline that's run by the state of Michigan. So these are all different ways that you could be reporting abuse if you suspected it. These are some other good websites and resources, and I can make these slides shareable and I can make them available to you. So if you want them, the QR code there, it links to our website, where we also have a list of a lot of good resources that we share with caregivers, and it would have everything that's on this list there as well. All right, so we covered a lot of ground and a lot of topics. Now, what questions might you have? Yes? Do we have to pass around a mic? Oh, we have one. Oh.
Yeah, hello. All right. Yes, first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity. For me, it's quite interventional. Probably if I had heard you earlier, met you earlier, some decisions I wouldn't have made them, especially for some of us who moved in here into your country quite recently. My challenge is that it looks as if the schools here, expose the kids at a very early age to technology. And so when they come home, they are basically doing everything on their laptops and everything. And you are telling me that I should also kind of take it away from them. I mean, how am I supposed to do that? It was quite easier back home, but here, very challenging.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, our schools are giving kids laptops starting in kindergarten, right? And so they have constant access to technology. And the schools are monitoring those laptops as well. So they will receive notifications if inappropriate things are happening on there. But when your kids are home, I would just really try to put in rules that limit it to you're doing homework, and then we're going to turn it off when you're not doing homework. Because a lot of those laptops, it's games. They're playing games on there. And so you want to be asking them, what are you doing? Tell me about your assignment. Are you done with your assignment? Let me help you with your assignment, right? So you're still staying involved. And obviously they have to do what they have to do for school. You don't want them to get a bad grade or something, right? But I think we also just want to say, if this is not about an assignment, if this is not your homework, then we don't need to do that right now. So it's the same thing. You're putting the parameters. And I think if you have questions about, are they really doing their work or are they just playing, I would ask their teacher about what those expectations would be. Or if you have concerns, like my kid comes home and they're spending 3 hours on their Chromebook when they get home, talk to the teacher and share those concerns. The teacher might say, what? I'm not even giving them homework, right? You don't know. But having those conversations, I think, would help in that situation.
Thank you.
Good question. Yes?
What will happen if the children will play games without permission?
Well, that's why we have rules, right? And that's why it's important that we try to follow rules. So if your parents have rules about you should ask for permission, then we should do that first, right? And sometimes if we make a bad choice, there could be a consequence, right? Like maybe they might take away the device or say you can't use the device for 2 hours or whatever the rules might be. But that's a consequence, and that's why making good choices is important. I always teach kids, it is your job to make good choices. And if you're not sure if something is a good choice or not, it's important that we ask, right? So if you're not sure if you should play a game, then you ask. And it's always okay to ask questions. And we want to teach our kids that it is always okay to ask questions. And if you ask me a question, I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to be upset with you. I'm not going to shame you. But asking questions is good because then that can help us avoid making the wrong choice. That's a great question. Yes?
To a follow-up to the question our brother asked about devices which students use.
Yeah.
Well, the experience I have is that I've taught in the elementary, middle, and high schools.
Mm-hmm.
And here, we don't allow students to bring their own devices to the school.
Okay.
You see, it's only when they are going for computer classes, they are there. You use it and then go back to your class.
Right.
And cellular phones, even in the high school, when they bring it to school, they put it in the office.
Yeah.
They bring it because of emergency.
Right.
You want to call home and tell mommy or daddy this is what is happening. So even when I used to teach at the juvenile center, there we don't allow cellular phones at all.
Right.
At all. But in the high school, if you bring your cellular phone, even the primary school, you keep it in the office.
Right.
And then in case of emergency, you can call.
Yeah, and unfortunately, every school is different about the rules that they have for cell phone use at school or whether or not they allow kids to take their Chromebooks home. Every school is different. I do think schools are starting to change and put in more rules about that stuff than they used to. A lot more schools now do have rules about if you have a cell phone at school, it has to stay in your locker or it has to stay in the office. But yeah, as a parent too, I think it'd be important to ask our schools, what are your rules about technology? And we show up at a school board meeting and we say, I don't think these are good rules. Like, we can change the rules. And as caregivers, it's okay to be a squeaky wheel and go to the board meeting and say, these kids have way too much technology, and what are you doing at the school to try to limit that? And I think that's a good thing for us to all be doing. Yes? Oh, one here. There's one there. I'm not looking. Oh, look at all these. My little friends. Okay. Okay.
Can I talk now? Okay, thank you for the information. I have a question. If you already have a teenager who has a phone, what can you do as a parent?
Yeah.
Besides that, are there any apps for parents to monitor what their teenagers are doing? Because all they talk about is privacy. I'm a teenager.
Yeah.
And it becomes a challenge. So what advice do you have for such parents? And also, if there are any apps that parents can use to monitor their kids, what they're doing on their phones?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I do these trainings a lot, and then I have parents that say, like, I have kids that are in high school, and they already have all these devices, and what do I do? I think, one, it's always okay as a parent to say, hey, I learned more about technology, and we're going to put in some new rules. It's always okay to introduce new rules, right? So if you learn more about potential harms that are out there as a parent, we can introduce new rules to our children. That's okay. But there are a lot of that you can download that will help you monitor what kids are doing on their device. There's like Life 360 is a good one that can help you track the location of your children. Also, like and it just depends. Every piece of technology is different. Like within an iPhone, like through Apple, you can set up like a parent account on your Apple device, and you can have your kids kind of linked to your iPhone, and you can monitor things that way. I did put up, where was it? No, there was one. It's called Bark, BARK. That one is a really good one that you can download, and it'll help you monitor what's happening on their devices. But I would encourage you to just kind of research it, because there's so many out there. There's so many, and they all kind of work in a little bit different ways, or they might be for different pieces of technology. But those are some, and like some are free, some you pay for. But I would start by just looking within your device about what parent controls they have, like within the iPhone, within the iPad. A lot of them have parent controls that you can set up already. So that's a good way to start. Yes, thanks. I'm trying to find it to put it back up. I don't know where it was, but I'll leave this one. All right, I had some younger friends with questions, right? Yes? Do you want to just come up here? Yeah. What's your question?
My school has computers. What if we get on something we're not supposed to get on, like YouTube?
Oh, okay. So, if your school has computers, does your school have rules about how to use the computer? Yeah, probably, right? And maybe the teacher gives instructions on where to go and what to do. Again, it's about following rules, making good choices, and asking questions. So if something pops up on your computer at school and it's, not good, ask a question. Okay. What else? I'll come over here for you, friends. We have a lot over here. Oh, you have one. Good. You can borrow mine if you'd like.
There's a game. It's called Prodigy, and it's a safe game because you can report people. And I made friends on that. So can we friend people?
So a lot of games are designed for kids, right? And they have safety things on them for kids. But unfortunately, sometimes people who have bad intentions also know that that's where kids hang out. And when we're online, even though somebody may say they're a kid, does that mean they're telling the truth? No, right? So it's tough when we're online because we can't see them, we don't know them. And so again, if somebody is a friend online, we want to ask an adult if it's okay to have that friend. And if somebody online that we don't know starts communicating with us, then we need to not share personal information. So we don't want to talk about our age or where we live. We don't want to share personal stuff with people that we don't know if they are showing up in a game that we play. Because even though it's a safe game and it's for kids, we never know, right? It could be somebody that may be lying about who they are. So we always want to be careful online because it's hard. We don't see their face. Yeah, go ahead.
So at school, what if the teacher's playing something that your parents say you can't really watch, but if you told the teacher, at school sometimes the teachers play videos to help us learn, but sometimes your parents say you can't watch stuff, but the teachers say you have to use it to learn, but you can't really watch it.
So that's a good question. When the teacher does that, do you tell them that your parents has rules against you watching that? Sometimes. So I think that's one place to start, right? Is say to your teacher, hey, my parents have told me I'm not supposed to watch this, right? And see what they say. But if the teacher doesn't listen to you when you say those things, then I would go home and tell your parents that your teacher is doing, and then have your parents talk to the teacher so they can share their rules with that teacher so they can know. Go ahead.
So if, at school, a boy comes to you and then tries to say that you've been looking at me, I bet you have a crush on me, and then starts following you all around the school, and then starts making rumors that you and the guy are dating, but you're not, and then he starts stalking you, and then after that, he keeps following you. What do you do?
So if someone is making you like feel uncomfortable, right? And if that were me, I would feel uncomfortable if that was happening to me. You have the right to feel safe and comfortable, especially at school, right? That's supposed to be a safe place for kids where you can learn and grow and feel comfortable. And if anyone, whether it's a student or a teacher, if they're doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable, that's why we have safe adults to talk to. So maybe you'd find a different teacher. Maybe you would go and tell the principal about what happened. If you feel like this kid is really following you around, that's not safe, right? So you would talk to the principal, tell a teacher, go home and tell your parents, and then have them talk to the principal. As kids, it isn't your job to solve that problem. That's an adult's job, right? And the best way for an adult to know is we have to tell them. Because if you didn't tell your parents that that was happening, or you didn't tell the principal, do you think they would know the problem was happening? Probably not, right? So that's why talking about things is so important. It's a good question.
Go ahead, Dee.
So I wanted to ask a question, or maybe it's a statement rather. Going back on the grooming issue, sometimes, how do I say it? I'm not excusing groomers, but sometimes certain behaviors or certain comments may be misinterpreted by the younger crowd to be grooming, because I like that you had your grooming slide color coded.
Yeah.
In our culture, we tend to be a very close-knit community, and sometimes we say certain statements to our young folks that may be misinterpreted for grooming. And so I just wanted to, I guess, call our attention to it. And I'll switch my tongue a little bit. That can be misconstrued as grooming, okay? And what I said was, in our culture, because we're such close-knit, it takes a whole village, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes when we see the young girls growing, or the young boys, oh, you're growing so fast, look, your breasts are budding, or whatever, that can be uncomfortable, but it doesn't seem like that to us, because we're so close-knit and it's culturally acceptable. How do we handle that?
Yeah, so I think one thing that is important, that if a kid says to you, I feel uncomfortable with something, we should respect their boundaries, right? And that's true with anybody. If a person voices, I'm uncomfortable with something, we need to try to find a different way to talk to them, or to, interact with them. But also, these are color-coded for a reason, right? So when we tell kids about grooming, it's what we call spotting red flags. And a red flag doesn't mean that something bad is happening. It's just a clue that you pay attention to. So if somebody makes a comment, it doesn't mean that they're a bad person and they're trying to harm you, right? And we want to teach kids that. Most people are good people. Most people are kind and nice. Most people don't want to hurt one another. And it's important that we teach kids that, so they're not constantly afraid or worried or looking for weird things going on in their life. So that's part of it, is that just because somebody says something, it doesn't always mean that they're up to no good. But it's always okay to ask an adult too, right? Go to your parents and say, hey, this person said this to me, and have a conversation with other adults, so then they can decide if it's truly concerning or not. Because again, it's not a kid's job to determine that. It's the adult's job. Yes, you want to jump in?
And I will add to that. That is why we're all here and studying these things. Back home, certain things we said may have been appropriate, but now, where we are now, who said it can lead us into some trouble. So if we so that a child will go back home and say so and so said this to me. Now you have a discussion to see whether your intentions were pure or not. And to avoid all of that, thank you.
I have a question. In one of the slides, it came up that the child can say, this is my body, and I can do whatever I want with it. There's that saying going on, and I've learned in some of the state, I don't know about Michigan yet, and I quite remember we were discussing something at home, and one of my boys quickly interjected and said, "Do you know what they are teaching them in the classroom?" And that clicked my mind because I've read and heard that there's teaching going on, teaching our kids that your body is your body, it's your own. And some of them are switching from male situation to female, to become female. And that teaching is going on in classrooms. If it is, what can we do as parents to put an end to that or say something to stop that issue?
Okay.
And is that going on or happening in Michigan? If it's happening, what is your department
I
doing
spend
about
a
that?
lot of time in all the schools in Berrien County, some in Cass County. I've never heard a school encouraging or teaching anything like that. But what they do teach kids is that it is your body, meaning you have the right to feel safe, right? And it's within, like, just because it's your body, that doesn't mean you can just make all the choices in the world, right? It still has to be within the bounds of what is safe. And as families, everybody has different beliefs and values. And it's important that we support our own beliefs and values and we teach that to our children. But it's also that somebody may have values and beliefs that differ a little bit, and that doesn't always necessarily mean that it's harmful, but it may not be what you believe. But that's why within your family, it's important that you're instilling those values within your family, because those are your children. That's where your responsibility lies. And if you do have concerns with what's going on in schools, most of them are very transparent. And if you want to see, I want to see that lesson that's being taught in my kids' health class, or I want to review the curriculum. You're always within your right as the parent to ask that. And if it doesn't align with your values or beliefs, there is usually a process to opt your child out. So if you say, I don't want my child in that lesson because it doesn't align with our values, the school has to honor those things as well. So it's about having good communication, and as a parent, making sure that you know what's going on. So reading the letters that come home, because there is, like, if there's certain lessons in a health class, they have to notify the parents first, and it's within your rights to review that. And you could choose to opt your kid out if it didn't align with what your values were.
Thank you.
One more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. If you have a teenager who is who has a friend outside of the state that he or she is living in, and that friend does not have the same values that you as parent have for the teenager, and is misleading. What would be your advice for such a parent?
So you get a lot of good years with your youth where you are the sole source of information, right? But eventually, our kids do branch out and they do end up spending time outside. And you know, we say this all the time as a parent, you can't be with your kid 24 hours a day and monitor every single thing that you're doing. But what you can do is set them up for success, right? If you as the parent from the very beginning have been instilling the beliefs and values that are core to your family, you know, your hope is that they carry those on with them even when they encounter things outside that may be going against that. Because unfortunately, as much as we want to protect our children, they might encounter things that could be against our values or that could be harmful. But we want to give them the tools to know what to do, to how to say no to things, how to resist peer pressure. And that's, you know, something that we should be starting from the beginning with our kids. And that's kind of the best thing that we can do to arm them for their future, because eventually they become adults, right? And so then they're on their own. And that's kind of what we do as caregivers. We're always preparing our kids to be independent. And we want to give them the tools to do that in the right time, in the right space. Yes.
You've given us a lot of good information. And one of the things you said is that we should let our children trust us and come to us when they have problems. But as parents, what we should know also is that whatever we say in the house or do in the house is a training we are giving to them. So if you tell your child the child is lying, I don't trust you, and all that, the child may not be willing to come to you when she or he has problems. So even if that's something that you think is not true, don't say you're lying, or I don't trust you. Like you ask him, have you eaten your breakfast? And you say, yeah. And you think that the person has not eaten it. You can ask, oh, what type of food did you eat? So that you come to exactly what she wants to tell. Maybe a loaf of bread a slice of bread. So we should not tell our children they are lying or we don't trust them. That's not good. It doesn't help them to come to us when they have problems.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's true. And sometimes kids might lie about things. That's kind of like a normal part of childhood development, is sometimes they do. But what we don't want them to do is lie about the important big stuff. Yeah. Or if they need help. Yes, do you want to borrow mine?
Thank you so much. Can you give us an example of a child abuse situation, and how did your office try to help the victim?
So our agency, what happens is if somebody makes a report of child abuse, typically those reports would either get sent to law enforcement or Children's Protective Services for them to begin an investigation. Our center specializes in talking to those children about what happened. And then we also offer therapeutic services to the kid and the family. But our staff has specialized training to talk to those kids in ways that are non-leading, and it's legally sound. So the interviews that our people do with those kids are really solid interviews that really get to the root of what happened. Because sometimes it was a misunderstanding, or sometimes it wasn't what we thought it was. But our staff is really skilled and trained at getting to the truth and the root cause of what happened. And then from there, if it is that child was harmed, our staff focuses on the help and the healing for that kid and that family. So we have therapy, we have advocacy. If they have to go to court because it's something where somebody's being charged criminally, we help support that family through that process. But we also have medical services. If the child needs a medical exam or they need medical attention, we can do that at our agency. And everything that we offer is free to the community. So nobody pays for therapy, nobody pays for the advocacy, they don't pay for those specialized interviews. And then we also work with law enforcement and like the prosecutor's office to make sure that those cases don't fall through the cracks or they get forgotten about. Because sometimes, there's so many cases and there's just not enough staff. Like sometimes things fall through the cracks, and we make sure that we advocate for those kids so that they don't get forgotten and that they get justice and that they get healing services. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Thank you so much, Allie, for sharing your afternoon with us and for providing us such educative and informative information. God continue to bless you. And we have something small for you that says thank you for coming. Let's rise and let's have Pastor Beckson offer a short prayer for Allie and for all of us, for God to continue to bless her in her work.
Thank you. Shall we pray? Thank you, our good Lord, for this beautiful Sabbath afternoon. And thank you for your education that has been given to us through your maidservant. We pray that together we will train, nurture, teach our children so that we can grow to your standard, being faithful, being good in physically, spiritually, mentally. In Jesus, your holy name we pray. Amen.